The next question: who are the sons of God referred to in Job 1, verse 6, when it says they came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them? Let's turn over there to the book of Job. This is actually recorded twice in the book of Job. And it's a little bit of a difficult passage because of another specific passage from the book of Genesis. But Job chapter 1 verse 6 says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them." Now if you go forward to Job chapter 2 verse 1, "Again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord." I believe, and I have to say it that I believe, I cannot say that I'm certain or that I know, but I believe that this is talking about angels. And what is being described here is that God is having some sort of review where his angels come before the throne, and there is some interaction between the angels and God. The word translated sons here is a pretty general word. It usually does mean sons, but it can also mean subject. You might say America's sons and use it sort of the same way that we would use sons, where we don't mean necessarily biological sons or offspring, but those subject to or those who are under the authority of. I think pretty clearly this means angels. The difficulty comes from Genesis chapter 6. If you look at Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, it says, "The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown." Now, the question then arises, does Genesis chapter 4 teach that angels had offspring with human women and created a race of giants? I don't think that's the case, because Jesus talks about angels and says they neither marry nor are given in marriage, and it seems to be that angels are somewhat genderless beings. So I don't think that's the proper way to interpret Genesis chapter 6 verse 4. But you see the difficulty in saying that Genesis 6 verse 4 is followers of God, human beings, and Job chapter 1 verse 6 and Job chapter 2 verse 1 are angels, when it's the same phrase. But the truth is, the same phrase is also used in other places, sometimes referring apparently to human beings, and sometimes referring quite clearly to angels. One example is also in the book of Job, Job chapter 38. Job chapter 38, God is speaking after Job's friends argue with Job, and Job argues back and forth with three of his friends, and then a fourth man speaks at the end, Eliphaz, and then chapter 38, God answers. And God answers Job's friends, and he answers Job's. And God's first response is, "You are in no place to question me." And in part of God's laying that forth, God says this in Job 38 verse 6, talking about the earth, and saying to Job, "You don't know how the earth was created." Okay? "On what were its bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together," and here it is, "and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Or who enclosed the sea with doors when bursting forth it went out from the womb? So let me ask you, who was there shouting for joy when God first created the earth? It wouldn't have been a human being. It would have been an angel. It would have been angels or myriads of angels. But it's the same phrase, sons of God. So clearly in Job 38, the term translated sons of God is referring to angels. Another place is in Daniel. Daniel 3, verse 25. It's a little bit different phrase, but it's almost exactly the same. Daniel chapter 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have been thrown into the fiery furnace. And Nebuchadnezzar is mad as a hornet, and he has the furnace heated up super hot. And the guards who took them to throw them in the furnace were burnt and killed. And they even had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in all of these clothes that ought to burn. And when they throw them in there, they don't burn. And Nebuchadnezzar can see them. Daniel chapter 3, verse 25, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Look, I see 4 men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm. And the appearance of the 4th is like a son of the gods." Same basic term. Translated sons of God in Job 1 and 2, Job 38, and now here. Job 38 and Daniel 3, it's clearly talking about a heavenly being. So I think Job 1 and Job 2 are talking about angels coming before God. And I'll let somebody else ask what Genesis 6 verse 4 means at a different question and answer. I think Genesis 6 verse 4 means men who follow God. But it's a really tough question, because why should that produce giants? And Nephilim or Nephilim is a race of giants, and they lived where Goliath lived. But you also have the flood that comes after this. So there's a lot of confusing things in trying to answer that. But I think Genesis 6, human beings, Job 1 and 2, heavenly beings. That's my opinion.